What's up builders, it's me, Jimbotron, back at you with another video. In today's video, we will be doing something that I've wanted to do for a while now. For some context, a while back I started a Discord server. You can access all of my builds, their rankings, there's a leaderboard, and everything. Overall, this is a really helpful tool, and I wanted to grow my community. So I decided that once a week, I will be selecting a viewer's build from the Discord server to review. If you want to get your build reviewed, make sure to join the Discord down below. So, introducing the No Hit Scan in My Lobbies build. This build is all about cycling your airtime, which will allow you to constantly be proccing your auto-aim, and this is a really strong cycle. Let's get into it. So, I am honestly unsure how to structure these videos. I'm going to try something out, and I want you guys to let me know down in the comments how I did. First, we'll be starting off with me reviewing the build like I review all my builds. However, instead of scoring it at the end, I'm going to give suggestions as to what I would do differently so that this is a fair review that you, as the viewer, can get something out of. Then, to round it off, I'll give my overall thoughts on the build. I will keep my fan build ratings separate from my main ones though, just so it doesn't get overwhelming. So, coming up first, we have powers. And if you play any amount of Pharah, you'll know that round 1 is basically always Heat Seeker, depending on whether you're going AP or weapon power. Honestly, it kind of makes sense. Now, I'm generally against aimbot powers. I made a whole post over on Reddit about this. I think aimbot powers are stupid. If you don't know, there are 3 types of powers. Offensive powers increase the damage you do. Defensive powers decrease the damage you take or increase the amount you can take. Utility powers make it so that your abilities gain effects they wouldn't normally have. Aimbot powers tend to fall into the category of utility. You can be multiple of these types at once, like an offensive utility power, and that's mainly what aimbot powers are. However, my argument against them is that they usually only allow you to do damage that you wouldn't have been able to do due to bad aim. In a world where you had 100% accuracy, these powers would be useless, so technically they don't actually add offense. However, here it makes sense because a lot of the later parts of the build require direct hits, which is honestly quite difficult on Pharah, so this helps enable that. The next power we have is Fuel Depot. Typically, when doing this build, you wouldn't take this one so early, but I can see why. I actually learned something here. Fuel Depot carries over rounds. If you stack this on round 2, you'll have that extra 50% fuel for the entire game, which is kind of insane. Later on, it also synergizes with another power. Up next, we have Cyclic Salvo. This makes it so that direct hits instantly refuel some of your fuel, while also giving all of your cooldowns a 1-second reduction. This is insanely strong if you have good accuracy, because for every person you hit directly, you get 3 seconds of cooldown reduction, as well as more airtime. Honestly, this is incredibly high value, especially since cooldown reduction is so expensive. As for the final power, we have Fuel Conversion. I'm personally not a huge fan of this power. However, it allows you to jet dash more often at the cost of fuel. If you have a fully stacked fuel depot, this isn't too bad, but I don't love the idea of sacrificing airtime. That said, since this build is designed to deal with hit scans, it does make sense to spend less time in the air. Now, moving on to items. The first one is Bloodbound. This item is usually a throw. It makes it so that whoever killed you last does 15% less damage to you, and you do 15% more damage to them. On paper, this sounds amazing, but in a 5 vs 5 game mode, it can be hard to get consistent value. However, on Pharah, the person killing you is almost always the hit scan. If they only have one, this 15% damage reduction becomes insanely valuable. It basically gives you an unfair matchup into your main counter. It falls off if they have multiple hit scans, but against 1 or 2, it's actually great. Another pick I like here is Blast Enhancer. This increases your explosion radius by 25%, making your shots much more forgiving. Since your primary fire is your main damage source, being able to salvage near misses is really valuable. And finally, we have Aim Assist. This is one of the stronger healing items in the game, even though it's conditional. A direct hit heals you for 15% of your max health over 3 seconds, which is basically 5% per second. This is stronger than Martian Mender and Gloom Gauntlet, and technically the best percentage-based passive heal. Since your dash combo guarantees hits, and your dash is on roughly a 5-second cooldown, you can realistically have this active around 60% of the time. Now, moving on to some changes I would suggest. First, triple volley. This makes it so that after using an ability, you shoot 3 rockets instead of 1. The devs actually adjusted Heat Seeker to synergize with this, so after a dash, all 3 rockets will auto-aim. That means cyclic salvo will proc 3 times instead of once, giving you 3 seconds of cooldown reduction per dash. When paired with fuel conversion, you almost completely refund your fuel and nearly reset your dash cooldown. This creates a full power triad that essentially removes your downtime. Because of that, I would personally drop Fuel Depot. It's still strong, but if your goal is to deal with hit scans, you don't want extended airtime, and triple volley gives you more consistent value through resets. Another addition I would recommend is Vanadium Injection. This gives you 100 health and 10% to all major stats. I won't go too deep into it, but this item is fundamentally overtuned and fits into almost any build. Also, Barrage tends to struggle without team setup, so investing into raw survivability and stats is usually more consistent. Then, praying your ult gets value. One final change I'd make is in the early game. You're running double survival, which I understand, but I would swap First Aid Kit for Med Kit. Med Kit lets you start healing instantly and generates more cash, whereas First Aid Kit just speeds up recovery. It's simply more efficient. Now for my overall thoughts. In terms of usability, I'm not a Pharah player, but if I were, this is absolutely a build I'd consider using. It's consistent and doesn't rely too heavily on niche setups. In terms of fun, this is honestly where the build shines. Even as someone who doesn't enjoy Pharah that much, I had a great time with this. And in terms of potential, this build is very close to being great. With a few tweaks, it could easily become one of the stronger Pharah setups out there. That's everything for today, builders. If you're interested in getting your build reviewed, like I said, the Discord link is down below. Till next time, builders.